Okay, hi, I'm Jon, and with me on stage is Helge.
Hey, we both work for Microsoft Development Center Norway, and we're part of the team that develops the Office Graph and Dell. Microsoft Development Center Norway was formerly known as FAST. We were acquired by Microsoft in 2008. That's quite a long time ago, actually. When we were acquired, we didn't have any UI we shipped, actually. We shipped a platform, a search platform. And today we feel like we've come a long way with the Delve and also the Office Graph. So we're going to have a look at both the Office Graph and Delve here today.
So welcome, everyone. This is a presentation about building solution with Office Graph. And it's a privilege for us to be here today. And we are super excited to talk to all of you about the Office Graph, the people that we care about the most, our customers, our partners, and the developers creating amazing experience with the Office Suite, and all the IT professionals. We hope that you are excited about the topic, and we will do our utmost in the next hour to get you enthused on building new solutions on top of the Office Graph. Arthur C. Clarke's third law states, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And the Office Graph is a bit magical. It breaks down content silos and makes connections between entities that to this point has been impossible inside of an enterprise. And speaking of magic, a magician never reveals how his tricks work. Thankfully, this is not a magic show. The two of us on stage, we're not magicians. We're engineers. We want you to understand so that you can take advantage of the wealth of information stored in the Office Graph and build amazing experiences that will delight users and help them be more productive. Please note that this is a roadmap presentation. Some of what we will show you here today is not readily available. We do apologize for this. But we do also hope that you will appreciate us sharing early, giving you the time to ramp up and be ready once we go to public beta. Office 365 is Microsoft's cloud platform for the enterprise and consumers. It's a suite of services ranging from email in Exchange Online, document storage in OneDrive for Business, work content management in SharePoint Online. It even includes Word, Excel, and PowerPoint running in your client machine or in your browser. Inside of Office 365, there is a wealth of data and relationships that we store in what we call the Office Graph. And the Office Graph is an intelligent fabric that applies machine learning to map the connections between people, content, and interactions all across Office 365. Powered by the Office Graph, we have Delve, a modern experience inside of Office 365 that enables you to navigate, discover, and search. Okay, so we have a packed agenda for you today. First, we will look at the Office Graph and the new Office 365 experience called Delve. And Delve was built to take advantage of the richness provided by the Office Graph. And we will use Delve throughout this talk to illustrate some key capabilities of the Office Graph. Then we will change gears and look towards the future of what the Office Graph will be and highlight some important changes that we will light up in the coming months. One of the clearest messages we get from our customers is that they want to see data from other services inside of the Office Graph and visualized in Delve. And to show how we envision this, we have integrated Salesforce to the Office Graph, and we will show that to you here today. Lastly, we will show you how to use the Office Graph APIs to create brand new experiences powered by the Office Graph. So if there are two things you should remember once you leave this session, the first one should be how to get external content into the Office Graph, and that we will enable this. The second is how to use the Office Graph and its APIs to build amazing experiences on top of that.
Okay, so Delve, how many have been to any Delve sessions this week? Some people, cool. How many remember Delve from the keynote? Oh, excellent. So Delve is a new tool in Office 365. If you click the upper menu, you will see it there. It's hidden below Mail, but you have Calendar, you have Sites, you have OneDrive for Business, and you have Delve. And it's a little bit different from the other tools in Office 365 because it isn't specific towards one task, like sending an email or inviting to a meeting, but it's reaching across all the other workloads and showing you what's actually happening in your organization, so you can stay up to date, that you can find what you need, and that you can discover new connections in the organization. And in order to do this, Delve is based on the Office Graph, so we're going to take a more in-depth look at the graph itself. Traditionally, and also in Office 365, we have a lot of data which is sort of only loosely connected. We have lots of users, obviously. We have files in different formats, but also in different systems like SharePoint or OneDrive for Business. We have different conversations in Outlook or in Yammer. We have our Active Directory with users and groups. We have events in different systems, tasks in project, etc. And the Office Graph really breaks down these silos by linking these entities together and organizing work and things you worked on across all these workloads. You should think of the Office Graph as a reasoning layer that connects you to all your colleagues, all your documents, everything you work on, and everything that matters to you. And this really happens while you continue to work in all the tools you prefer to work in. So you don't need to use a new tool for the Office Graph to start doing this. You just work in your email, your calendar, in SharePoint, in OneDrive for Business, in PowerPoint, in Word. And the Office Graph gradually connects the dots in the enterprise across all the workloads. It adds semantics and insights to the relationships. And it makes this available to any app in the Office 365 suite and any other tool in the suite as well. Okay, so we're creating this huge network of stuff. What about security and privacy? That's something that we get a lot of questions about. And to take security first, that's obviously super important for the Office Graph. And we always respect whatever security, whatever permissions are set on data in your source system. So Delve, for example, will never show you anything you cannot see anywhere else. We actually had this discussion with Enterprise Search for many years as well. Whenever I search for something, suddenly something shows up and it shouldn't show up. Well, you shouldn't blame that on search, but maybe you should investigate your information architecture or how you're protecting things in the first place. But anyway, in the graph we take this extremely seriously and we make sure we never show you anything that's not available in all the other tools already. And you can really think of the graph as one huge network, which is interconnected, but where every user sees her view of the graph, her documents, her connections, her relationships, and not everything else. So that's really, you get your view of the graph. When it comes to privacy, we are collecting what users are doing in Office 365 whenever somebody's opening a document or editing a document. And that means we also need to take the privacy into account. So if I am viewing a document, that's really a personal matter. Nobody should have any interest in me viewing a document. So therefore, that's something we only will show to the current user. With me editing a document, in SharePoint at least, that's a publicly available information. So we can show who has actually been authoring documents. So we have a strong distinction between private and public actions in the graph. And if it makes sense, we can also sometimes aggregate numbers and say, hey, 1,000 people have looked at this document, but we won't show you which 1,000 people actually did that. So we are also dealing with privacy, and that's a key design principle of the graph to distinguish between what's yours and what's open to everyone.
Okay, so it's time for a demo. So let me show you Delve. And Delve, as I said earlier, is an experience built to take advantage of the Office Graph. And as you can see, it's a visually beautiful and it organizes content in some unique ways that I will briefly walk you through now. First off, what you see here is the homepage of Delve. And on the homepage, you find a wide range of document cards. And these represent documents that are stored in OneDrive for Business, in team sites, sent as attachments. We even have cards for websites. And these appear in Delve if you post a link in a public group in Yammer, Microsoft's social offering for the enterprise. They will be brought in and showed here inside of Delve. And this page is all about discovery. And I come here to find out what's going on inside of my company. And why does things appear here? Well, it's because the people that I work with and their colleagues, they're interacting with all of these documents. And then we apply machine learning to suggest the most relevant documents for each of us. So this homepage is unique to every one of you. There is no two equal homepages. Okay, then we have the Me page. And the Me page is where we go and look at what I am doing. So no matter where the content is stored, I can always come to this page and find the documents that I am working on. This is a very convenient way for me to quickly get back to what I was doing. Delve is very much gathered around people, so it's a social experience. And as we showed you earlier, 25% of all the people relationships that are stored, all the relationships that are stored in the graph are people-to-people relationships. And what I find myself doing a lot is going into Delve and look at what my colleagues are working on so that I can really stay in the know about what they are doing. More importantly, if I'm having a meeting with somebody that I've never met before inside of my own company, and that happens a lot inside of Microsoft. We're 120,000 employees, so I will go and look up them on this page. And to help me with that, we have a fully fledged search system. So I can, for instance, search for Johan, and on the top result here, I have Johan Grönvik. So I can click on him, and what I see now is the documents that Johan is working on and that his colleagues have been working on recently. So if I'm now to have a meeting with Johan, and I've been to his page, I can see commonalities between us, and I can use that sort of as an icebreaker into that meeting, and make that meeting progress a lot better. The last thing I want to show you is what we call a board. And a board is a way to organize content inside of Delve, no matter where that content is physically stored. So let me click on one of these boards, design IDs. So you can see here different people have potentially added to this board. So anybody can create the board, anybody can contribute to that board by adding new data, and you can also share a board through email. So I know that there are documents out there that are similar to these, so let me do a search for a document. And I'll find a document, best practices for slim design. That sounds a lot like documents that are good for design IDs. So I can just open this menu, and right down here you will see the board design ID. So I will now add this to that board. Getting back to that board is easy. I will just click on that, and there you see that board, document already being associated with this board. Okay, that concludes our first demo. So let's go back to the presentation. So let's quickly summarize what we've gone through so far. Delve is a user-centric experience with data from all over Office 365. It's built on the Office Graph, where we apply machine learning, and we have a lot of those capabilities built in there. And users can collaboratively organize content using the boards feature. The Office Graph is a graph for the enterprise. It contains nodes and the relationship between nodes, or we call them edges. The core data model is centered around people and their activity. And we look at who is working with who by co-authoring email and the org chart. Or what actions are actually taken on documents, like modifies, sharing, or comments. So now we have given you an insight of what the Office Graph is capable of today. Now we want to switch gears and turn our attention towards the future and what the changes that we are making to the graph and how we envision that these changes will be applicable to you.
Right, so how many here have tried to create any solution or app based on the Office Graph today? Some people here and there? Okay, so we now have some good news for you guys. We are going to open up the API a lot, and from some point in the future, the graph will not only be something you can query and get data out, but you can actually create data in there. You can read data still, obviously, but you can also update what's in the graph and delete it. So it will be a very flexible data source, as well as the insights layer it already is. So that's really the main news in this session. Every developer creating an app can utilize that graph and also put data in there. And in addition to that, the graph will not only deal with predefined data, such as documents and users and emails and tasks, but you can also define your own types and put in the graph and link them up with the rest. So we can define your bug, for example, if you have a bug database and you want to represent bugs in the graph. And then you can link that bug to documents and users and even calendar events or whatever that's already in the graph. So we are going to open up this graph a lot going forward. And I think that's going to be amazing news for every developer, every system integrator, with lots of new exciting possibilities. So we're going to take a look at that the next couple of slides, what this means in practice. So last week at Build, Microsoft announced something called the Office 365 Unified API. That's shown as a purple box on this slide. The Unified API is an API that's on top of all the other Office 365 APIs. And it provides you access to all the Office 365 data through one one API surface. And that might not sound like such a huge thing, but if you have tried using all the different APIs, you will know that's a great thing. There's one authentication model, and the Unified API will do the different types of authentication towards the other subsystems. It provides one unified method or one unified and coherent way of accessing data. And if you, for example, is using one of the functions in there, let's say you call a function called working with, that will give you a list of users that work with the provided user. And then the Unified API will first ask the Office Graph for that set of users, and then it will go to Active Directory and pull out some more information about those users. And you just have to make one call to the Unified API in order to do that. So I think that's great news for developers. And then in this figure, we have the Office Graph as a layer underneath here, providing some glue and insights between the other data. Well, the Office Graph itself will also have an endpoint, which will be an OData REST endpoint that you can choose to access directly if you want to. But you can also access it through the Unified API. The entities that are in that graph may be mastered by the Office Graph itself. So if you provide some new entity, you can choose to store it in the graph. Or you can create to just store kind of a proxy object or a shallow representation of your data in the graph and then refer to data somewhere else. What's one important design principle of the Office Graph is that it's a strongly typed API. What I mean by that is it's a graph, so we have nodes and edges, but when you work with it, you actually work with typed objects. So you work with users if you're dealing with users, you work with documents if you're dealing with documents, etc. So that's really on the API side. Some great news for everyone, and that's why I also put your app up on the top there, because I hope you guys will find a way to create cool apps using these new APIs. Okay, so what type of data will we have in there? Well, if you looked at Delve and Office Graph today, you see that there's a lot of data in there already, with documents from SharePoint, attachments from Exchange, and public links from Yammer, etc. So we will obviously continue this trend and bring more and more data available through the graph. And what will be brand new going forward is what we call action nodes. So an action node is something that represents a user action. If I, for example, modify a document, that's a modify action in the graph. And then the graph will give you access to these nodes, and you can traverse the nodes and go and look at what have I been modifying lately, etc. So these nodes will help traversing and finding new insights in the graph. You can also define your own action nodes, add your own actions whenever someone is doing something to your data. So this is a brand new mechanism that we think will be hugely beneficial to application developers. We also have what we call relationship nodes, which are nodes that link together other entities in the graph. So that's a little bit about what data will be in the graph and what type of data. If we go one level deeper, we'll have a number of modeling concepts in the graph. And it really starts out with some nodes, exemplified here by files, or a file and a user. So that's what we call nodes in the graph. Such a node will have different properties. So a user would have a name and an alias, maybe an email address and some other properties. And a document or a file here would obviously have some other types of properties. A title, a URL maybe. And then we have a special type of property we call a navigation property. So the author property here in this case refers to a user. So that's really what we call an edge in the graph. So that's a pointer to another node. That's a very useful type of property to have in a graph. That's sort of what makes it a graph. And then, in order to really use this efficiently, we're introducing a concept called extensions. So imagine this user is also an employee in our organization. Well, maybe there's an employee facet or an employee extension. So you can take the user object in Office 365 and apply another extension to it, and suddenly you have an employee as well. So this employee extension here contains the title. It could contain other data as well, and you can imagine using this data in your HR application. In a similar way, out of the box, we will provide multiple extensions to certain objects in the graph. So a document extension could contain things that are specific to a document. If it was a video, it would contain the length of the video and the display or the display resolution and things like that. So this is a very nice way of modeling different views upon the same data. Okay, and then finally I talked about action nodes on the previous slide. So an action node will also be a node in the graph representing some kind of action that's taken by a particular user. So the action node has some properties in itself, like when this action was performed, and it has some navigational properties pointing to the user performing the action and the object it was performed on. It can also have a lot of contextual information, like which application was this action taken in. Lots of context information that you can create and add to the action itself. We also have, I mentioned briefly on the previous slide, we also will have relationship nodes. So if you want to connect several nodes in the graph and have some properties there, you can create another type of node which just links all the different nodes you want to connect. Actually, I'll have a demo a little bit later where I'll create something like that to show you. Okay, and then how will an API look like for something like this? Well, as I said, we're going to use REST and OData. And in this case, I want to get everything that Jane liked. So first I navigate to the user Jane, and then I just say I want all the actions of type liked. And that gives me some data back. If you look very closely, it's really a list of the like actions taken. So I can see that I get some references to objects, but I don't really get the objects back. And as a developer here, I probably want to show what Jane liked. I don't just want to show she liked two entities and then show their URLs. So what I can do is I can add this $expand equals object. That means please also expand this object and give me back what's there. Follow that edge, basically. So that means I want to extend the object here, and then I get the object inlined in the response here. So this is going to be a very nice way of traversing a graph and getting back just the pieces and slices of the graph that you actually want and need in your app without having to go back and forth a lot of times to actually get that data. Okay, so we will also provide client-side SDKs to do this, because we know a lot of people like working with REST and OData, but a lot of people also prefer strongly typed client-side object models. So we're going to provide client-side SDKs on the most common platforms. Exactly which those are, we'll see, but it's likely going to go beyond Windows platforms. And then what's also worth mentioning is maybe there is something called a metadata object available on the server. So you can ask for having the metadata, and then you get back a list of all the object types, all the properties, everything that can be used on this server. So that's basically a document describing all the available data on the server. Okay. Since we come from a search background, and today the Delve and Office Graph is available through the SharePoint Search API with a graph extension, we definitely want to combine the power of a graph traversal with searches. So if we consider something like items I have modified, we can think that that's a traversal from me through the modify action to whatever I modified. So that's a graph operation. But then I only want to have things that have windows in the title. Okay, can we actually do that through OData and REST? And luckily we can. Otherwise I probably had skipped this slide. So we do that by simply combining the graph traversal with the full text query here. And we think this will be a great way of doing some of your queries, some of your job with graph, and some of your jobs with a search.
Okay. Dijkstra, he was a wise man, and he was also a pioneer within computer science. And this quote, which I find quite striking, is a great segue into our next topic, analytics. So as we already established, Office 365 is a suite of different services. And the content in these, as well as the user actions, are stored inside of the Office Graph. And the Office Graph is really the brain of Office 365. But a brain with no content is not very useful. So the Office 365 brain is filled with memories or insights, many of which are created by analytics. These insights span workloads, providing a richness and completeness that we in turn use to create amazing experiences like Delve. So when we look at how to make this brain smarter, we have two different ways of doing this. First, we have something we call reactive analytics. And reactive analytics, it's like the human sensory system. Inputs are immediately captured and processed. And if the output warrants an update to the Office Graph, that is done within the same transaction. So this means that the Office Graph will be able to learn incrementally, where each increment will make it a little bit smarter. And then we have these big batch-oriented types of analytics, where we process rows upon rows of data. Once these jobs have completed and persisted their output to the Office Graph, the layout of the graph might have changed considerably. People that you used to relink to are now gone because you're not working with them anymore. New people are brought in so that these are now linked to you because these are the actual people that you're currently working with. So, drawing an analogy to real life, these batch jobs are like sleeping. Huge quantities of data is processed and stored away for later retrieval, while redundant information is removed to make room for new insights. Okay, so I'm going to give you now an example of reactive analytics and how that comes into play. So in this example, Bob is preparing to send an email to Alice. Both of them are working inside of the same company, but like me, there are many people in Microsoft I've never met before. So this is actually the first direct contact. So after Bob is done composing his email, he will send this to Alice. So what happens now is that the email is sent to his mailbox in exchange, And Exchange immediately determines where that email should go, and it passes it along to Alice's mailbox. But as you can see down there, that email is now linked to Bob with something that we call a sender edge. So that is now brought into his personal graph. Now, reactive analytics kicks in. So reactive analytics will look at Bob and see that he has sent an email to Alice, but he will determine that there is no connection between those two people. So now he will create what we call a working with node, linking Bob to Alice. Similarly, when Alice receives this email, this is immediately sent to her clients. And a receiver node is created on her edge, or an edge to that email with a receiver type. And likewise, on her side, reactive analytics kicks in, looks that she has received an email from Bob, but there is no connection between them. And similarly, that same working with relationship is established from Alice back to Bob. Okay, so far we have looked at data that is inside of Office 365. Now we will expand our scope and look at extensibility options. And that is, how do we bridge the gaps to also include data that live in external services?
Okay, so what extension points do we have with the graph? Well, first of all, today with Delve and Office Graph, you basically have to upload data to SharePoint as a file, or send an email or do something in Yammer, and that's sort of how you affect the Office Graph. Going forward, you can push your own data in, and that will be stored as part of the Office Graph. You can have a file in some third-party system, and you can push it in as a file object to the graph, and it will be there and dealt with just as any other data in the graph. In addition, you can define new data types, and you can define your bug, for example, or your opportunity, or whatever you have in some other line of business system, and you can make that something that's available in the graph. Further on, you can set up notifications to be triggered based on different events and different conditions in the graph. So that's a great way for having your third-party app actually show something to a user when something happens in the graph. And then you can also push in actions. Whenever somebody is doing something on data that's in the graph, you can push in an action representing what the user did, and the graph can reason over this and provide new insights to you. And talking about insights, we have obviously built-in analytics, and as John said, we have the reactive analytics that reacts immediately, and we have the batch type of MapReduce analytics that works with larger amounts of data and takes longer to complete. And we will provide mechanisms for you to customize these different types of analytics so that you can get the insights that your data needs or that your app needs on our data. So these are all the 5 main extension points of the graph going forward. In addition, we have the Delve experience, and we get asked a lot, how do I get my data into Delve? So first of all, we will make some mechanisms for customizing how data appears in Delve. And today we show data as cards. So that means you should be able to customize what actions you can take on a card, for example. If you have a bug in a bug database, maybe you want to be able to close that bug immediately from Delve. Maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't. But that's the kind of extensibility we're looking at here. And then when I say boards here, I really mean to select what data goes into Delve in the first place. Because one thing is customizing how something shows up if the graph decided it should show up. But you also need to be able to influence what data shows up in Delve. And the most basic mechanism for doing that is adding something to a board, because Delve will show different types of boards. But there will also be other mechanisms to allow you to influence what actually shows up in Delve. And we think there will be a multitude of applications that can utilize different parts of this. And we also think there will be solutions where you basically use Delve as the UI, the user experience, and you just work on getting the right data in there. And then in Delve, you click and do actions towards your line of business systems, for example. Okay, and let's talk a little bit more about enriching data within the Office Graph. So I already mentioned we have different types of data, such as a user and a file, and if you wanted, you could add an employee extension to a user. So using the Office Graph API, you can examine what extension does every object in the graph actually have. You can go and look at the different nodes and see, okay, so this is a user, but it's not an employee, etc. And then you can also add new extensions. So you just do a post through the interface and you say, okay, I want to apply the employee facet to this user. And then you're enriching existing data. And this can be some built-in data we have in Office 365, and we never really envisioned for you to put employee data on there, but you can do it. And you can use that data, and you can share that data with other apps as well through the graph. And even though that's very powerful to use the existing extensions we have, we also believe that you will want to define your own extensions. So there will be a schema service that keeps track of what extensions are defined in your version of the graph, in your tenant's version or in your user's version. And then you can get any extensions from there and check what's already in there. And you can post new ones and really immediately update the API. Because I mentioned earlier that the API is a strongly typed API. So if you have a user, you're dealing with a user. If you have a file, you're dealing with a file. And if you define a new bug, well, then you immediately have a new bug available in the OData API as a strongly typed object. So we think that's something that's going to be very convenient for app developers and integration vendors to do. So we'll actually show you some code for that later.
Okay, so we know that the modern workplace is fragmented. Companies are using a number of different services to get their job done. They might be using Office 365 to send emails and store documents. And then they might be using Salesforce as a CRM system, or a visual collaboration tool like Trello. So opening up the Office Graph through extensibility, we will enable our customers to place shallow representations of their data inside of the Office Graph, and then potentially have it visualized in Delve. So we see three different ways of doing this. First, Microsoft will stand up a service that will host some of these, what we call a connector. And this is, the goal for this service is basically to make it as simple as possible for the end users to connect their data in an outside service to the Office Graph. Then we think there will be some cases where the service itself wants to integrate tighter to the Office Graph and actually place the hooks inside of their code to push data and potentially also retrieve data for those customers through the Office Graph. And the last model is basically where we think that a third party will actually do this themselves. So Microsoft will not go out and do this. This external service will not go and do this. But some ISV or something will come in and create these connectors and then sell them in some ecosystem that we will help set up. So in addition to the service that we will be standing up, we will also, as Helge mentioned, provide you with an Office Graph SDK to make it easier to talk to a REST API and have a well-defined endpoint to talk to. Okay. So at the start of this talk, we called out the two things that you should remember once this talk was over. And the first was how to add content to the Office Graph. And this section is about that. So as we already established, various services inside of Office 365 feed content and user actions into the Office Graph. But now through extensibility, we could add external sources to the Office Graph and Delve, exemplified here through Salesforce. And Salesforce will be made available to one of the three models we just showed you. So now it's time for a new demo. And in this demo, I will take on the guise of Jon Meling. He's a sales director for Contoso.
Anyone heard of Contoso before? Yeah. Excellent. So Contoso is this fixtures company that we use for different purposes. I remember demoing them having a public website in SharePoint doing sales of some products. They also have a bank.
Where you keep all your money.
Yeah. That was not such a good idea. They even have a university.
I got my master's degree there.
Yeah, I figured.
I'm a PM.
So they are very versatile, but in this case, Jon is a sales director there.
Yeah, and this Contoso is a company that delivers custom-made interior to big international airline companies like Tromsø Airways, Bergen Airlines. And Contoso is a part of the Office 365 first release program. And as such, they've been using Dell for quite some time. Now, as a sales director, I've connected my Salesforce account to the Office Graph. And I've also selected to have Salesforce opportunities appear in my Delve experience. My sales team has done the same. So now let's take a look at what Delve looks like. So this is now Delve for Contoso. And as you can see, it's quite the same. You have the normal document cards, but there are some things that are new here. First of all, we have this Senja Airline trolleys, which is a Salesforce opportunity. Over here, we have a task that is assigned to me in Trello, that I need to go and approve something inside of Trello. And we have different types of content here, but this one really interests me because Senja Airlines is a new company for my company. We recently established connections with them. And Johan Grønvik, he's really a junior salesperson. So I want to help him with his work. So I will create a new board for him, and I will call it SA Trolleys. What I know is that I have a different sales representative. And his name is Kim. And I know that he worked on a similar opportunity some time back that he won successfully. So what I want to do next, I want to find the documents that he created for that. So I will search for TROLL. Okay, so now I see that another opportunity against Bergen Airways that Kim won successfully some time ago. And I also see that Kim created a board for this opportunity. So I will go and click on that board. So inside here, I find two documents that were most likely highly relevant for him winning this opportunity. So what I want to do now is to add these to the board I recently created. And then go and take a look at that board. So what I could do now is I could send this as an email to Johan, who is a new sales rep, and I can say, hey, please work with Kim and use this board as a baseline for your cooperation. So one of my more senior sales representatives is Helge Solheim. And he works on these big opportunities that make our company a lot of money. And I see here that he has created a new opportunity against Tromsø Airways for some business seats for 777s. And he has already created a board because I know he does a good job. But I still want to check out what this looks like. So I see his sales pitch is in order. He has already some new ideas for what the seats design should be. But let's take a look at this Salesforce opportunity. Wow, it takes me to Salesforce. But not only that, if you pay close attention down here, under related resources in Salesforce, you see the same document cards that were boarded together inside of Dell. So these are bridging these two services together and creating a seamless workplace for the individual users. Okay, you're allowed to clap. Okay, so let's proceed with our presentation.
Yes, so that was the extensibility demo. And the previous demo showed how we could get data from another system into Office Graph, how it could surface in Dell. And it also showed that we had actions on this data that got us back into the original system. And in that system in Salesforce, they had chosen to run some kind of query towards the Office Graph and also show the related documents there. So this was a really tight integration between two systems, showing how we can get data back and forth by using the Office Graph. So the next demo is a little bit different type of demo. We're going to show you how you can use the existing Office 365 APIs and combine that with the Office Graph and with custom data that this particular app wants to store in the graph. And that's really the second takeaway from the session, how to build solutions using the graph combined with the rest of Office 365. So here's the scenario. I'm smiling on this picture, but I'm also a little bit confused because I'm going to 2 conferences in a row, first Build and then Ignite. And I have to bring all this stuff with me, and I have to do all these things to get going. So I have a lot of collateral I need to bring with me, and I have a lot of people that have opinions about what I'm about to present, and I need to do some dry runs, and I need to get some approvals from my managers, and I have a lot of customer meetings in between, and I need to attend the booth and the press lounge and etc. So I have all these things, and that's really the case for this app. We wanted to create a very simple, specialized app for going to such a conference and keeping track of all this. So most of this is already in Office 365. I have PowerPoint slides and Word documents in OneDrive for Business and SharePoint. I also have lots of meetings in my calendar, and of course I have my colleagues in Active Directory. And that's all good, and I could use the boards feature in Delve, and I could hook these things together a little bit. But I want to create an app that's even more specific than that. So I will define in the Office Graph 2 new concepts, a conference and a demo. And then I will just use these 2 concepts and connect them to the already existing things in Office 365. So that's really my data model in this example. And then we'll be using the Unified API to talk to the Graph and Office 365, and we'll have a Windows 8 app. Well, actually, I have to admit, since we haven't shipped yet, I can't actually use the Unified API for the Graph part. So I'll be using a server in Oslo for that part, and relying on a number of things that always make a demo successful, VPN on multiple servers, but we'll see anyway. So, if I switch over here is our demo app. So it's my Windows 8 app, and it shows me 2 demos planned, the Salesforce integration demo and the scheduler app demo. So if I click on the scheduler app here, it will show me some conferences where I intend to use this demo. And it will also show the participants and some documents and some schedules. So here we have a totally new object in the graph, a demo. And for that demo, I'm retrieving a number of conferences. And then for the current conference, I'm retrieving the participants, the documents, and the schedules. So all this data on the right-hand side here is actually in Office 365 available in my SharePoint, in my calendar, and also in my Active Directory. So if I want to add another document here, I click the Add Document button, and here I'm using the trending around function in the Unified API, which is again using the Office Graph. It knows who I'm working with, it knows what I have been working on myself, and it will give me a list of documents that are highly relevant to me and people I work with. So by doing this, I get a very nice document picker here. And so I can just double click on something, and it'll add this to this particular conference. I also have a similar feature with the participant. So if I click on Add Participant, it'll ask for the working around me people based on who I'm working with in the graph. And we already saw in John's slide how the reactive analytics will update the working with relationship as emails flow in. Well, it also takes into account co-authorship in SharePoint. So if you're actually editing the same documents in SharePoint, that's a very strong signal that you're working together. Even though your Active Directory org structure doesn't say you are, or you never actually email with that person because he's sitting right next to you and you don't need to email. So by using the working with feature here, I also get a very nice, good view of people here. And then obviously I can add a schedule or add an entry here in my calendar. But that's really, yeah, that's really not the point of this demo. The point isn't really to show you all the features of this demo, because I'm sure all app developers could create a demo doing, or some app doing more useful stuff, but it's really to show you the principles here. So we saw that this this app was able to go and grab data from Office 365. It was able to define some new types in the Office Graph, to use some Office Graph functionality like working with and trending around, and then also to hook up my new Office 365 data with my new conference and demo data with Office 365 data. So let's actually go and look in Visual Studio what this looks like. So here's my SAML project front page. If we go into the initialize method here, we'll see that the first thing this code does is to actually make sure I have all the extensions available. So let's go in there. I'm using a little trick here. I probably wouldn't do it like this later, but I'm just trying to get something from the conference endpoint, and if that doesn't reply, well, then I will actually create those extensions. So if we go in here and look at the code here, here I am creating a conference. So a conference has a name, location, a submission deadline. That's super important, by the way. It's always a mess to not upload your PowerPoints before you have to. And then I just create this object, and I basically send it off to the server. So if we go here, go to definition, you'll see I'm here just posting to extension types on my server. So I'm just serializing the JSON representing this object and posting it to the server. So that's really how I define my extensions. That's the first thing I do in the initialize method in my app here. I make sure I have a conference and a demo available. Okay, and then when that's done, just going back here, if you scroll down a little bit, we see that I go here and I get all demo entities, and I loop through them with a for each loop. So this particular class here is likely going to be something that we ship as a client-side SDK for you. But since we haven't really completed this yet, we had to make that client-side SDK ourselves. But let's go in here and look what this actually does. So when I call get entities here, what I do is I make a call using the entity name just underneath me here. So immediately after I posted my conference and demo extension, I can go and do a call to a get call to /me/conference, and I get the list of conferences back. And then I just deserialize the JSON, and I have an object in memory using this this graph exo CRUD object. So this is really a very natural programming or way of programming with REST and OData. And when we get the client-side SDKs out, it will be even easier. But it should show you how we're thinking about extending the types in the Office Graph. Okay, I'll go back here then. So with that demo, we showed you how to connect your Office 365 existing data to some new data. And we think that's going to be a use case for a lot of apps that you can create in the future. And just to really rub it in, it's not available yet. And I must say it's highly likely that what I show here will change before it's actually available. But we have chosen to share early anyway, so you can get a good idea of what you're really thinking in this area. And the first thing you'll probably notice is that I said we're creating a new graph endpoint with REST OData, but we're really part of an existing REST OData endpoint here. And then the first thing you specify is the version. So when we make this available, at the first time it will be beta. And then you specify what entity set you want to get or post to, or delete or whatever. So if you want to get all the actions, everything somebody liked, and if it's the current user, you can do a /me/actions/liked. So that's how you specify that set of data. If you, instead of using me, want to specify a particular user, you do a /users, and then you give in the user ID there, /actions/liked. So if John Doe is actually the current user, those two green lines there would be exactly the same. And then you can imagine using the groups feature that also has been announced lately and get demos for a particular group. And then just showing some examples of IDs. In some cases, an ID is a very human readable thing, like a username or an email name. In other cases, it's a very computer readable string, which you have to put in there to actually get to the right object. And then once you have your object, you can always ask for different properties, and those properties could be navigational properties bringing you onto other objects. So I just put in some examples here: conference name and location. So the first thing the app did was to post an extension if it wasn't available. I did not use a get and check whether I got it back. I should have done that, but for some reason that didn't happen. Maybe we thought of it too late. But if you do a get to extension types, you get all the extensions back. If you do a post, then you can define a new extension as shown here. So here I'm defining a conference extension, and I'm just listing the properties and the types of those properties. I cut out a few so you could actually read the slide. And then we have some information at the bottom saying how this thing should surface in the API. Because even if the object is called conference, we might need to have it somewhere specific in the URL path. And then if you want to use that extension, once it's defined, you can do a get for it. And in this case, the conference was stored in between a me node, so it was sort of scoped to me with a /me/conferences. But you could also imagine that you can do a /conferences, and you sort of get the conference object that's global. So there's likely going to be some kind of scoping here, because otherwise it could be a mess if everyone can access or can write data to everyone in the graph in a way. So there will be some kind of scoping here. And then when you do this, you'll get the conference back, and it looks something like this, or you could get a number of conferences back, obviously. And when working with this kind of data, just a small hint is I like to use the JSON editor online. It's a very convenient thing where you can paste in JSON, and it'll immediately tell you what's wrong, or if it's correct JSON, it'll show it nicely in a tree, and you can drill down in there, because I'm not too big a fan of this JSON syntax really. More the XML generation maybe. But anyway, using that editor, you get it in a nice tree. Okay, so we're going to wrap up by showing a roadmap of features that will be coming in the graph going forward. And we're also going to give you some suggested next steps if you want to proceed down this alley. So first of all, we will bring you a number of innovations beyond what you see in Delve and Graph today. We will bring you a REST OData API, where you can do simple or advanced graph traversal, where you can create, read, update, and delete data. And that's really a key takeaway from this session. You can create, read, update, and delete data there. And thus, it's a whole lot more flexible than the graph we have today. And then we will follow up with client-side SDKs for using that API in a convenient manner. We talked a lot about type extensibility, how you can define your own extension and add data to existing data, or add your own data to the graph. And then Jon showed you a great example of having a connector for Salesforce, bringing Salesforce data into Graph, and also bringing Salesforce data into Delve. So we're foreseeing a number of out-of-the-box connectors, but we also hope a lot of people will build their own connectors for their systems. And then we talked a little bit about analytics and how we foresee that can be customized. We talked about notifications briefly, that there will be a number of mechanisms that can trigger callbacks to your apps and your web pages and so on. Finally, need to mention licensing. We're looking at some kind of licensing model. We don't know what that will be. But that's like the final thing to mention here on the roadmap.
Right, so what should you do next? Please go out and read about the Office Graph. It's already available at weboffice.com/officegraph. Build apps using our APIs and the unified API, and play around with working with and trending around. And test the new Office Graph API or Office Graph preview API once we get that out. And watch out for public beta.
Yeah, tweet. So the preview API is really already out, but it gives you a good idea of what will be in that graph, even though you can't do any CRUD there, and even though we don't have that strongly tight API, it's a great place to start and get to learn about the graph.
Please use Yammer, tweet, shout, whatever you need to do about the Office Graph. If you use it if you use hashtag Office Graph, it will maybe be heard, but please talk about us.
Yeah, so we have some related sessions. The top ones here have already been shown, but there are some other sessions. You can, of course, also watch the other sessions live on Channel 9.
Skip this one.
And then to sum up, Delve and Office Graph has recently been released. It does bring intelligence and insights to what you're working on. We have a number of Office Graph improvements coming up, the most important one being the ability to add your own content, enrich existing content, and get data from other sources into the graph. And then on our release roadmap, the next thing will be a public beta. We're not there yet, so we apologize for not having a beta you can try out. But again, we wanted to share early so you are prepared and know what's coming. Okay, and then before we open up for questions, we ask you please fill in your evaluations for this session. Then we can learn and do better next time. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.